Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'd just like to start this episode with rest in peace to everyone that lost their lives over this bullshit fucking conflict, which didn't need to be a conflict. Worry about your own shit. Stop worrying about other fucking people. So I reckon when every one of them people woke up that morning, or were going to bed that night, they were planning out their next day, planning out what they were going to do on vacation, planning out the next thing they were going to do with their family. And that's just fucking over. For what? War is the most senseless human undertaking. Not only due to the destruction, the loss of life, the destruction of resources, and for what? It's so stupid. The people at the top argue about something fucking petty, and the people at the bottom are the ones that fill the bags. We gotta do better. It's amazing how people will never stop inventing shit to kill other people better. Instead of doing stuff to fix the planet, instead of doing stuff to feed people, instead of doing stuff to house people, there's literally trillions of dollars dumped into devices of murder. And the wildest shit is we tell our kids to get along, be nice, share, when grown folks don't even fucking do that shit. No wonder a lot of kids don't listen to their parents. I didn't listen to mine. I'm hoping my kids will listen to me, but all they have to do is look outside. But if I can keep that kind of shit in my household, where you respect each other, you share, you're kind, you don't put down other people, then maybe we can do something to change this world. Anyway.
You hear the shouting before you see the men. Axes striking shields. Iron on iron. The wet slap of boots in mud. A horn sounds somewhere in the fog, and suddenly the line surges forward. You grip your shield tighter. Your arm is shaking already, and the battle has barely begun. Across the field you see them. Tall men with round shields and wolf pelts tied over their shoulders. Their war cries roll across the valley like thunder. Someone next to you mutters a prayer. Not to Christ. Not yet. To old gods. To spirits older than Rome. Because the world you live in is collapsing. The Roman Empire is gone. Cities are empty. Roads are crumbling. Kings rise and die in the span of a decade. And today you fight for a young warlord named Clovis. If he wins this battle, the future might belong to the Franks. If he loses, the Franks may disappear into the chaos like 100 tribes before them. And somewhere in the middle of that battlefield, a decision will be made. A desperate promise. A prayer shouted into the sky. A promise that will shape the religious and political map of Europe for the next 1,000 years. Morning fog hangs low over the fields. It smells like wet earth and smoke from last night's campfires. You grip your shield. 3 layers of wood glued together. Iron boss in the center. Leather strap cutting into your arm. Your spear is 8 feet long. Ashwood shaft. Iron head sharpened against a whetstone at dawn. You are one of thousands standing in formation behind the banner of the Franks. Across the field you see the enemy. Tall men with heavy shields and long hair tied behind their helmets. You can hear them shouting already. War cries rolling across the valley like thunder. Someone beside you mutters that they outnumber you. 10,000, maybe more. But numbers matter less than what happens when the shield walls collide. Because that moment is where battles are decided. Not by generals, not by speeches, by men with iron and muscle pushing forward until someone breaks. And today the man leading you is Clovis. Already feared across Gaul. But if he loses this battle, the Frankish kingdom might collapse. And if he wins, something much bigger begins. a chain of events that will lead to the rise of medieval Europe, all starting here, on a muddy field near a small town called Tolbiac.
Before Clovis was the king who reshaped Europe, he was the son of another warlord. His father was Childeric I. Childeric ruled the Salian Franks during the middle of the 5th century. At the same time, the Western Roman Empire was collapsing. He wasn't some barbarian outsider crashing into the Roman world. In many ways, he was part of it. And I'm still sick, if you can't tell. Childeric served as a Roman military commander, probably holding the title Duke, or regional war leader. He was under Roman authority in northern Gaul. This is something modern people often miss. The line between Roman and barbarian had already been blurred. Frankish kings commanded Roman troops. Roman generals hired Frankish warriors. The world was mixing, and Childeric was right in the middle of that transition. In 1653, workers digging near a church in Tournai discovered something extraordinary: a royal burial. Inside were hundreds of gold objects, weapons, and jewelry. Archaeologists later confirmed the grave belonged to Childeric I. The treasure revealed a fascinating mix of cultures: Roman military insignia, Germanic weapons, gold bees used as royal symbols. This tells us something important. The Merovingian kings ruled between worlds, part Roman, part Germanic, part something entirely new. Clovis inherited that strange hybrid kingdom. Sources from the 6th century are frustratingly thin. The main writer we rely on is Gregory of Tours. He wrote about Clovis roughly 70 years after the events, and Gregory does not clearly record brothers or sisters of Clovis. That doesn't mean that they didn't exist. Frankish kings often had multiple children, but the historical record is silent. What we do know is that Clovis had rival Frankish kings, some of whom were relatives. The Frankish world was not a single kingdom. It was a patchwork of small territories ruled by different branches of royal families. These include rulers like Ragnachar, Childeric. Many historians believe these men were distant cousins of Clovis, and eventually, Clovis eliminated them. Ragnachar was executed after Clovis bribed his followers to betray him. Childeric was captured and later killed along with his son. So while we cannot confirm whether or not he had siblings, the Frankish royal family was absolutely soaked in internal violence. Kingship among the Franks was not inherited peacefully. It was fought for. The Merovingian dynasty had a strange symbol of power: hair. Frankish kings were known as the long-haired kings. Cutting a prince's hair was not just a fashion change, it was political. It meant stripping him of the right to rule. So when Clovis eliminated rival kings, he often had their hair cut before killing them. It was symbolic. You are no longer royal. You are no longer a threat. And now, you die. That gives you a sense of the world Clovis grew up in. Clovis became king around 481 AD, probably at the age of 15. Imagine being 15 in a warrior culture. Your father just died. Your followers expect you to lead raids. Neighboring kings are waiting to test you. If you show weakness, you are finished. Clovis responded the only way a Frankish king could: by winning battles. Within 5 years, he destroyed the last Roman government in northern Gaul at Soissons. That victory made him famous among Frankish warriors, but it also made him dangerous to his neighbors. The most important relationship in Clovis's life was not with a general. It was with a woman. Her name was Clotilde, or Clotilde. Clotilde was a Burgundian princess. Her childhood was brutal. Her father, Childeric II, was murdered during internal Burgundian power struggles. Her uncle, Gundobad, took control of the kingdom. Clotilde was raised in this violent political environment. But unlike many Germanic nobles, she was Christian. Specifically, a Nicene Catholic, the form of Christianity supported by Rome. And that mattered enormously, because most Germanic rulers were Arian Christians, a theological rival to Catholic doctrine. Clotilde represented something different. And the historical sources suggest something more complicated than romance. Their marriage was probably political. Frankish kings often married women from neighboring royal families to build alliances. Clovis likely married Clotilde around 493 AD, but Gregory of Tours records something interesting. Clotilde actively tried to convert Clovis to Christianity. She believed his pagan beliefs were wrong. At one point, she secretly baptized their child. The child died shortly afterward, and Clovis was furious. He blamed the Christian God, but Clotilde persisted. She kept pushing him. This tension between the pagan king and the Christian queen becomes one of the most central dramas leading up to Tolbiac. Clovis probably did not marry Clotilde out of love. It was strategy. But the marriage created something unexpected: a religious debate inside the royal household. Clotilde believed Clovis's soul needed salvation. Clovis believed the gods of his ancestors had already given him victory. Neither convinced the other, until the battlefield. When Clovis stood on the battlefield at Tolbiac and called on the Christian God, that moment did not come from nowhere. It came from years of arguments with Clotilde, years of political calculation, years of watching the Roman population of Gaul follow the Christian church. That prayer was not just desperation. It was the culmination of everything happening in Clovis's life: his family, his rivals, his marriage, his ambition, all leading to one moment on a muddy battlefield. Western Europe became a patchwork of kingdoms run by tribes that once lived beyond the Roman frontier. Visigoths ruled Spain and southern Gaul. Ostrogoths ruled Italy. Burgundians controlled the Rhone Valley. And in the forests north of the old Roman frontier lived the Franks. The Franks had been Roman allies for centuries, sometimes enemies, sometimes mercenaries, and sometimes settlers. They were not a single tribe. They were a coalition of warrior clans, loose alliances held together by charisma and violence. The kings ruled because warriors followed them, and warriors followed kings who won battles. Lose a few battles, and suddenly your followers find a new king. And into that brutal world stepped a teenager named Clovis. Imagine inheriting a violent tribal kingdom at 15. Every warlord wants your throne. Every neighboring tribe wants your land. And your own followers will abandon you the moment they think you're weak. Clovis didn't hesitate. Within a few years, he launched his first major campaign. The target was the last fragment of Roman authority in northern Gaul. A Roman general named Clovis. The Romans had ruled Gaul for nearly 500 years. But by this point, the Roman state was little more than a local government pretending the empire still existed. And Clovis attacked. The Franks crushed the Roman army. Clovis fled, and the last Roman province in Gaul vanished. Clovis had just destroyed the final political remnant of Rome in northern Europe, but that was only the beginning. The Frankish world was full of small kings ruling neighboring territories, and Clovis began eliminating them. Some he defeated in battle, some he murdered, some he tricked and then executed. Gregory of Tours later described Clovis killing rival Frankish rulers one by one until he controlled the entire region. And at one point, he reportedly lamented that he had no more relatives left to kill. That gives you a sense of the man. Clovis was not a romantic hero. He was a ruthless state builder. And that ruthlessness was exactly what allowed him to dominate the fractured political landscape of post-Roman Europe. But one enemy still threatened him: the Alemanni. The Alemanni Confederation were not one tribe. They were a coalition of Germanic groups living along the Upper Rhine. Their name basically means all men. In other words, everyone who shows up to fight. They had spent centuries raiding Roman territory. Roman historians describe them as huge warriors with heavy axes and ferocious charges. By the late 5th century, they controlled large regions of what is now Germany and Switzerland. And they were starting to expand west, toward Frankish territory. Conflict between the Franks and the Alemanni became inevitable. Eventually, the two forces met near a settlement called Tolbiac. Today, that place is known as Zülpich in Germany. Back then, it was little more than a frontier town surrounded by forests and muddy farmland. It would soon become one of the most consequential battlefields in European history. Early medieval battles were nothing like neat formations shown in movies. They were brutal collisions of shield walls. Men pressed together so tightly that breathing became difficult. Spears jabbed through gaps in shields. Axes hacked at helmets. Once the lines met, the battle often turned into dozens of small fights happening at the same time. Warriors grappling, knives drawn, mud and blood everywhere. At Tolbiac, the Alemanni hit hard. Their warriors pushed the Frankish line backward. According to later sources, the Franks began to break. And Clovis faced the possibility of total defeat. And in that moment, something strange happened. Clovis was not Christian. Like most Franks, he followed Germanic pagan traditions: war gods, ancestor spirits, sacred groves. But his wife Clotilde was Christian. She had spent years urging him to convert. Clovis refused, until the moment he thought he might lose everything. According to Gregory of Tours, Clovis looked toward the sky and spoke aloud. He called upon the god of Clotilde. He promised that if this god granted him victory, he would believe. Think about the psychology of that moment. A pagan warlord making a battlefield bargain with a foreign god. Help me win, and I will convert. And then the battle changed. Somewhere during the fighting, the Alemanni king was killed. That mattered more than modern people realize. Tribal armies depended heavily on charismatic leaders. Kill the leader, and the entire force could collapse. Without their king, the Alemanni began to panic, and the Frankish warriors rallied. Their shield wall surged forward, axes crashed down, and the Alemanni line broke. Soon, the battlefield turned into a rout. Clovis had won, and with that victory, he had a decision to make. Would he keep the promise that he had shouted into the sky? Clovis traveled to the city of Reims. There, he met Bishop Remigius. The bishop prepared the king for baptism. Gregory of Tours describes a massive ceremony. Thousands of Frankish warriors gathered. Clovis stepped into the baptismal water. The pagan king became a Christian ruler. But the type of Christianity mattered. Many Germanic kings followed Arian Christianity. The Catholic Church considered it heresy. And Clovis did something politically brilliant. He converted to Nicene Catholic Christianity the same faith practiced by the Roman population of Gaul. That decision instantly aligned the Frankish kingdom with the powerful network of bishops and clergy across the region, and the church gained a powerful protector. Clovis gained legitimacy. It was one of the smartest political alliances in early medieval history. The victory at Tolbiac did not immediately create France, but it started a chain reaction. The Franks became the dominant power in Gaul. The Catholic Church supported Frankish expansion, and other Germanic kingdoms weakened, until Charlemagne, it would dominate Western Europe. And medieval chroniclers would trace that entire transformation back to the moment Clovis made his desperate prayer on the battlefield. And still to this date, historians debate the details of the story. Gregory of Tours wrote decades later. The prayer might have been embellished. But the broader truth remains. Clovis converted. The Franks became Catholic. And that alliance between throne and church shaped European politics for a millennium. Sometimes history turns on massive wars. Sometimes it turns on a single decision, made in desperation. Tolbiac was one of those moments. A muddy battlefield, a desperate king, a prayer shouted into the sky, and the birth of a new Europe. Sources do not describe the campaign in detail, but historians believe the conflict began with Alemannic incursions into Frankish territory east of the Rhine. And Clovis responded by mobilizing his war bands. Frankish armies of the period were not permanent standing forces. They were levies of warriors bound by personal loyalty. The battle likely began with skirmishing and missile exchanges. Warriors threw spears and axes to disrupt enemy formations. After this brief phase, the shield walls advanced. Thousands of men pressed forward, shields locked together. Early medieval battles often lasted for hours because neither side could easily break the other's formation. Exact casualty numbers are unknown. However, historians studying early medieval battles suggest casualty rates between 10 and 30%. If the combined armies numbered around 20 to 25,000 men, casualties could have ranged between 2,000 and 6,000 killed or seriously wounded. Many additional fighters would have died during a pursuit, as fleeing warriors were cut down. These numbers are estimates, but reflect typical outcomes of early medieval engagements. Following the battle, the Alemanni submitted to Frankish authority. Some Alemannic territories were incorporated into the Frankish sphere of influence. Others fell under the protection of the Ostrogothic king, Theodoric the Great. This division limited Alemannic power and secured the Frankish eastern frontier. Within the next decade, Clovis launched campaigns against the Visigoths, culminating in the Battle of Ouilly in 507 AD, where he defeated the Visigothic king Alaric II. That victory brought most of Gaul under Frankish control. The Frankish kingdom eventually evolved into the Merovingian dynasty. 2 centuries later, the Frankish state produced one of the most powerful rulers in European history, Charlemagne. His empire would become the foundation. When you look at modern Europe, it's easy to assume the map always looked this way. France, Germany, Italy. But in the late 5th century, none of that existed. The future of the continent hung in the balance. And on a muddy battlefield near Tolbiac, a young warlord made a gamble. He gambled on a new god, on a new alliance, on a new identity for his people. And that gamble reshaped the course of European history. And with that, I'd like to close out this episode. Y'all take care, be safe. Fuck ice.